Hi, welcome to the Strong Enough Podcast, your relationship wellness podcast. I'm your host, Claudia. I'm so excited for today's guest. She is a leadership and organizational development consulting firm owner, and today she is going to share with you some amazing relationship advice, not just for your professional relationships, but for your personal relationships as well. Please help me in welcoming Jeannie Smith. Well, hi, Jeannie. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk to you about, first off, your work, but also we're going to dive into a couple relationship topics today.
Oh, I'm so glad that you invited me to this, Claudia, and I'm honored to be here. So I'm excited.
Excellent. Well, I know, we recently met, just so everybody else can hear a little bit about our journey together in a kind of a professional development group of sorts. And I was really interested to learn your background because you're basically a professional development and leadership extraordinaire, if I may call you that. So why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about what you do?
So I have been in human resources for the last 3 decades, and the last half of that, I've run my own business, which is a leadership mindset and organizational development consulting firm. And so I work with leaders at all levels. So it could be CEOs, directors, emerging leaders, to really take a look inside and how are they showing up? How are they cultivating the relationships with their staff? But most importantly, how are they connecting with themselves? So it's in order to really have a solid relationship with others, your team, individuals, both personally and professionally, you really need to connect with them, and the trust has to be there. But you also have to trust what's coming from the inside. And so I work with both with individuals personally and professionally, with their staff, and on their own personal development.
So it's so interesting to me, and it takes me back to one of those little cliches that we hear a lot of, you have to put your own oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on others. I think I had that conversation last week with my guest, but this sounds like, again, exactly the same thing where you're helping people understand that they have to work on themselves first to be able to be successful, not only in their relationships, but in their business and their business relationships as well.
Absolutely. You as an individual on a team, whether it be your home, your family at home, your soccer team that you do for whatever it is, for activities, at work, you play a vital role. And absolutely, it has to be that self-development as well. You can't just say, okay, I'm a leader and help me figure out my staff. Well, let's look at what is your contribution? Mm-hmm. What role are you playing? And that goes with any relationship. Any relationship, you have to look at yourself, like, how are you showing up? What are you contributing? What part do you play?
Right. And I think it's really easy a lot of times for, especially, really high up managers, leaders, heads of companies and things like that. They don't always necessarily want to look inward. They want to kind of say, what is my team doing? What more can I get out of them? How can I make them more productive? How can I make more money? But what it sounds like you're saying is that really lands inward. You have to start inside to make all those other things happen.
Absolutely. Like, I've worked with leaders in all these years who, like you were saying, how do I make my team point? What if you go whoop right back and say, what can I do differently? But also analyze, like, how am I showing up? And I have I have 3 different assessments that folks can do to actually understand who they really are. Because you know what? Sometimes they don't have the awareness. And in my HR career, I've often been that person to be the first time to relay the message the first time they've ever heard it. And so many times they've said, I've never heard that before. And although it's a tough, very sometimes inconvenient conversation to have, I do it anyway. And I encourage others to have those inconvenient conversations. But you also, what about yourself? Like, we have this self-talk, self-doubt sometimes, but what about this like pump me ups, So absolutely a lot of internal work with one-on-one coaching.
Right. So I want to ask you about something that you just mentioned. So sometimes the self-awareness and having those difficult conversations with another individual. I know this is a little off our topic that we're heading towards, but I do want to ask you, how would you advise people that are dealing with an individual, whether it's a friend, a coworker, that really doesn't have that strong level of self-awareness, maybe about some difficult behaviors? How would you advise them to address that with the coworker, the friend, for the most successful outcome?
Great question, and could be a complex answer. So if at work, being, again, HR hat, you need to focus on the performance not getting done. So many states have legal requirements. And so that's a manager's my advice for them is focus on the performance not getting done. For example, you don't realize that when you're in a room full of people, you tend to always want to take the stage and you don't give anyone else a chance, for example. So that what happens then is the performance of the team, right? So I recommend that they coach that way, focusing on the performance. In a personal relationship, so say it's a relationship with your spouse, and it's sensitive because you don't want to be accusatory and point fingers, but often with your significant other, if you say, based on how you did that, I feel this way, and I would feel differently. I think I would be happy with this if maybe you worked on it this way, for example, right? And so you don't you're not accusatory, but you're going into the situation with to solve the problem for a win-win, and sharing how you feel based on the action of the other person. And then they say, I didn't even realize I did that. That's the awareness piece. So now they're aware that whatever they said, did, act, what impact it has on you. So I think those are boundaries that individuals need to create so that they can share that openly. And we all need to know that they don't know what they don't know. And so for ourselves, we need to share how we feel. And it's really hard for people to communicate their feelings, but you owe it to yourself. And guess what? You owe it to the significant other. And then in a friend relationship, similar, because a lot of our friends, in some cases, are even closer to us than some of our family members. Like some of my friends are like sisters, right? So oftentimes we can be too blunt with our friends. So consider how you would feel and how you would want that information to be communicated to you. And then start there.
That makes perfect sense. And I love how you said to really focus on how the action or the activity made you feel. I think a lot of times we just jump in and you made me feel this, you did this, and then it puts the other person immediately on the defensive and creates not the best opportunity for a constructive conversation.
Right. Think about the time where somebody did that to you, like, you didn't do this right. You, and you're like, wait a minute. So exactly. Just don't point fingers. And you know what I learned early on? Don't even use the word you. It's all about sharing how you're feeling, how that action made you now respond this way. And it's helpful when you've had a really good connection with the individual on what the next step, how you would say that. So I feel this way when this happens. And if we could together agree to do it this way, but it depends on who the person is and how, so you got to get to know. I really, truly believe based on trust, you build a connection, relationships last. But it's always a work in progress.
Absolutely. And any relationship is definitely a work in progress. I was talking last week about how so many people think that there's this perfect, effortless relationship out there. And I am pretty sure that's a fairy tale. But I love the point that you're making. It's not just our romantic relationships that take effort, our friendships, our professional relationships. Everything takes effort to maintain and cultivate and strengthen to keep it going long term. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's always work in progress. It always takes effort, everything. And it's not a one way. I know so many times in our lives, we're like, I feel like I'm putting in 110% and it's not coming back. And not that you should have an expectation of other people, but it needs to go both ways in a really solid, successful relationship. And if you feel you're being shortchanged, you probably are. And it's in your benefit to speak up and say, hey, I'm feeling this way and this is why. And ladies and gentlemen, when it's the opportune time, not when that respect the other person and what they're currently doing. Because I know that's backfired on a lot of people. Like if someone's in the middle of writing the thesis for their master's degree, that's not a good time to start bringing this up. Or just think about, put yourself in their shoes. I guess that's probably the easiest advice. Put yourself in their shoes, even in that moment. And then maybe ask them, when would be a good time? I have something I need to talk about. And I tell you, that's probably the hardest part in a relationship is putting yourself out there and saying, when would be a good time? Because, oh my God, now I have to have that conversation, right? But it's
now it's out there.
When you put it out there, then you show up for it and you express your needs and your desires. It's amazing what the other person says. I didn't know. Back to the awareness. I didn't know. I'm going to do this and this. And it's great to then have that conversation as to, okay, I'm going to do this way. You've agreed to do this way. And then, what's fun in a romantic relationship is to say, have a word or something when they're going off track, like, I don't know, banana. And then they go, okay, I realize, right? Nobody else needs to know what it is. That's just fun between the couple is to say, because when, you're doing that thing and you say banana, right?
Then and you can switch gears and change directions.
And then you have that bond.
Right. I think that's a great idea. And I think something else that you said that we could really look at doing just as a whole society of relationships is reframing that I need to talk or we need to talk conversation. Because, when you said, hey, you put it out there, when is a good time for us to have a conversation? And the first thing that came to my mind sort of jokingly was, it's the dreaded, we need to talk. But I feel like maybe we start looking at that as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to learn maybe what I could improve on to strengthen my relationship. And it's an opportunity for you to gain the confidence to share with me what you're feeling and to bring a potential solution to the table. So maybe we can restructure that entire negativity of we need to talk.
I love it. Absolutely. And again, that we need to talk. Everybody's heard that before. Like, oh, okay, now what? Oh God, this is going to be bad news. But instead, and that could go in the business world. It can go in a romantic relationship. It can go with friends. Lately I've been feeling that, whatever it is, I've been feeling that you are too busy for me, if that's how you're feeling, right? And then just start. So when would be a good time to kind of address this issue? Like and here's some things that are on my mind. Maybe we could have coffee tomorrow and just, and the best part of communicating these concerns is ask a question and then sit back and listen. Truly listen. The biggest mistake so many people make, and I'm guilty of it, I've done it, where I'm like, oh, I got to think about what I'm going to say next. What am I going to say next? Well, can you possibly be thinking what you're going to say next and truly listen? I don't think you can. So sit back, clear your mind, be fully present, and listen. You've asked for this meeting. You've asked for this very valuable conversation. You've asked for input. You're asking for help. That's hard for people to do. Now sit back, give them time, be present, and listen to what they have to say. And then acknowledge what they're saying. And then, I didn't know, and then it's amazing what type of trust is built when you have those type of relationships, and the connection and the commitment to one another. It's just so much deeper than where the relationship was.
That is wonderful, because so many people do that. And again, I know I am guilty of it as well, where even in just normal conversations where somebody else is talking and you key into one thing they said, and then it's, oh, I know what I want to respond to that. And so you keep thinking about how you're going to respond to that point that was now 5 minutes ago. And so you've missed the 5 last minutes of the meaningful conversation, instead of really just shutting up and opening your ears and letting yourself truly listen and learn from what the other person is sharing. So that is really, we might be done here for the day. That was the best advice.
It also shows them respect that you asked their opinion and now you're listening to it. And I can go back in the work world, how many times I've coached leaders on, you ask their opinion, but you're not listening to it, or you're not doing anything about it. So what's going to happen next time? They're not going to share the truth with you because you don't do anything with it. The same thing happens in romantic relationships and personal friendship relationships, or family member friend. It's the same thing. So you need to honor their time, respect them and what they're talking. And when my husband hears this, he's going to be like, yep, there are times when you're just like, what? And say vice versa, right? It happens. So we all have to have the awareness of how we're showing up.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. Now, you mentioned something earlier, and I promise I've been listening this whole time, but I did key in on something that you said earlier. And you said sometimes our friendships can actually be closer than our family. And I wanted to dive into that with you, because I know that you've had some really long-term group of friends. And I wanted you to tell me a little bit about that friendship and kind of how it has evolved for you.
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate that I met some incredible souls when I was in elementary school, and we're talking kindergarten. So some of us were 5 years old, and we have retained our friendship all these years. So nearly 5 decades, which is like hard to believe. And we always would say, there was 5 of us total, that there are soul sisters, and that no matter what, when through divorces or moving away or, early, some of us had children early on, and some of us didn't have children at all. And some of us had abortions, and some people lost our parents early, and all these things, that we would always be there. They were the posse that we run to. And I remember looking back saying, I can't believe, I'd always be like, we've been together 20 years. We've been together 30 years. We've been together 40 years. And it was so amazing. And last year, 2020, which we can all talk about 2020, this was a time in our lives that I hope our children never have to go through that. It was quite eye-opening, quite educational to experience what we did last year. And one of my dear friends, who before I dig into that, I do want to say that, yes, we were closer than sisters. Because we chose each other. And so we had similar similar values in elementary school. And some of us still have similar values all these years later, not all of them. So now let me circle back to 2020. And one of our dear friends are this handful of gals. And I had I want to say a falling out, but I'm not even sure what exactly happened because she's yet to tell me. But now as we sit here, April of 2021, I have not spoke with her for a year. And my understanding is neither have any of the other ladies in this handful of friends. So I am still trying to figure out exactly what happened with that, but I approached the situation with the same tips and techniques that I've shared so far in this call. And what I coach leaders on is ask, what's going on? I've noticed this behavior change. What can I do? Even turn the finger around and say, is there something I did? I want to learn from it. We were talking a little bit earlier, and we talk like growth mindset, really learning from the mistakes, seeing things as opportunities. There is no failure. So asking her, like, if it was something I did, tell me so we don't repeat it. I'm here for you. And it was quite devastating for me to know that every time I was reaching out, there was no response. And so it was almost like a no, no, no. And here it's a year later, and I don't know what happened in 2020, but I also know how important it is for me to sit with my feelings and knowing that I did everything I could to try to figure out what had happened so that I could do whatever I could on my part to I want to say save the relationship. But I've also realized that we all evolve and we all have different values. And I touched on it earlier that we had similar values in elementary school. But when you're under 10 years old, under 12 years old, things change than when you turn in your 50s.
Right.
And we just may be on completely different paths now. And I used to say things like, people come into your life for a reason, a season, a lifetime. And this particular person was my lifer. And that was really hard. In 2020, we were experiencing so much loss. And this was just one more loss that I had. I made a decision last week to invite her to my mother's service, which is going to be in 3 weeks. And I feel that is the right thing to do because I will always love her. I will always have a special place in my heart for her and all the years that we've been together. And the things we've done has, in a sense, made me part of who I am. I wouldn't be who I am without this group of friends. And I sometimes you may not know, but you have to get closure on the inside for you. And I think that's a long explanation, but I think that's kind of where I am with her right now.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I do want to start by pointing out, we know this person is alive. We know she didn't literally fall off the face of the earth, correct? We know she's alive and well, or seemingly well. So, and it sounds like the whole friend group is sort of in the same boat as you, correct? As far as just one day the communication ended.
That's correct. As we were all trying to figure out 2020, we started jumping on regular Zoom calls. And somewhere in one of those conversations, this particular person decided that it's time for her to take a break from the group. none of us really know what happened. And I'm a problem solver. I want to know what happened, but I also have to realize that this could be a personal situation for her. And when she's ready, she'll come around. I feel I've gone through all the emotions of, and thanks for actually bringing up that, yes, she's alive. She didn't pass away. That I've forgiven the situation. I'm forgiving, self-forgiveness on how I let it affect me last year. And I think that's important for the audience to hear, is sometimes we may not get the answers we want, but that's okay. How are you working on you still showing up? How are you letting it affect you? Because we need to take charge of the thoughts and feelings that cross our mind on a regular basis. And how do you go about doing that? That's really important. And sometimes it takes time, and you got to give yourself that time and know that what you're living with, because what's in here is how, and we all know that life is short. Tomorrow's not promised to anyone. So how's it sitting with us today? That's what you need to take charge of.
Absolutely. And something that you and I discussed before we started recording was that whole sense of closure. One of the things I see a lot of people doing, and again, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, even professional relationships, is they lean on somebody else to give them closure. Well, I need so-and-so to apologize. I need to know what happened here. I need somebody else to do something to make me feel better. And I think this situation is a perfect example to show that is not always going to happen. And so how do you learn to get that closure on your own? Because we can't depend on the other person to provide it, or we're often going to be sorely disappointed.
Oh, yes, that's such a great question, and you're so right. I need this, I need that, I need this in both professional life, and personal life, and you have to figure out why you feel the need to get this from the other person, because the feelings you have are your feelings. They're not owned by somebody else. And to your point, sometimes we'll never get what we're expecting. I still don't have the answers as to why this particular lifelong friend went MIA. I just don't have them. I may never get those. And it's not even something that I should expect or that I have a right to. That's her personal life. Like, we all share, we keep our own things personal. What we do have to take and manage and take charge of is our own emotions. And so how do we do that? If we're relying on other people, you're never going to get there. You have to, what's in my core? How am I showing up? I mentioned the whole self-forgiveness. The self-forgiveness part for me and with this particular relationship is I let it bother me for months last year. And so I laugh. I joke around about blaming it on 2020. I don't really blame anything on 2020. It's always just a joke for me when I say that. But it was very hard. Even some of us who work on personal development all the time with individuals, it was a hard year. So, give yourself some grace for last year, but also like understand that it's okay you feel that way, but how do you want to show up tomorrow? And find that love that you had for that person, find the glass half full of that relationship, and realize that as hard as this is, nothing is permanent. Nothing in this world is permanent. And so enjoy the time that you have, embrace the moments you had, the memories. And for a while, my phone, when I got the new operating system, it would give me these random pictures. And when I would see them of her, I'd be like, oh man, she and I were in Sedona, or she and I were on this hiking trip in Torrey Pines. And today I now look at it and go, those were really great times. And if we ever have them again, great. If we don't, a time and a place for everything. And again, that saying, friend, a season, a reason, and a lifetime. And although I thought she was a lifer, maybe we're just on a hiatus, or maybe it was a really, really long season, or maybe we have grown differently and this was going to happen anyway. And it's okay, because when you have that solid relationship with yourself, then you can realize it's okay. And so to answer the question, like, what do you do, and relying on other people, you can't. You can only rely on yourself. So gear yourself up with all the tools and the skills and the abilities to handle these emotions when they come, so that you're not relying on other people.
That was one of the hardest lessons for me to learn, I think, when it comes to relationships and that closure aspect of not giving the power to another human being whose actions you cannot control. Yes. And once I realized that, though it was very difficult and took a while, it's so empowering, I feel like, to understand that the ability to heal really lies within ourselves. And I'm so grateful to have that lesson. And it truly makes me sad when I look at some other people sometimes that are waiting for those answers, for that other person to tell them XYZ. And you kind of just want to shake them and say, no, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz. You've had the power all along,
yes.
My dear. You can do this for yourself.
Yes. You made me realize, or think of something. When my dad passed away in 1998, he was actually killed by a drunk driver. And so it was a instantaneous notice. Like, I didn't have a chance to say goodbye. I didn't have a chance to apologize. I didn't have a chance to necessarily get closure, because I had so much I still wanted to tell him. Mm-hmm. But I had to realize that how am I going to manage this internally? And I have helped a lot of people understand that when they're here with that person, share that now. Like, there wasn't a day that went by in those 22 years after my dad passed that I didn't tell my mom how much I loved her and how appreciative I were for all that she taught me. And a lot of people don't do that. And that's when they live with regret, because they're like, I could have, should have told him. Well, I didn't get to tell my dad. So I've actually worked with individuals who are like, I don't really have a great relationship with my parents. And I'm like, hold the door. What do you mean? And they're like, well, we just don't see eye to eye. I go, so let me ask you this. If something were to happen to them and you could never talk to them again, because right now you're saying, I don't talk to them, how would you feel? They're like, I never thought about that. So we'll sit with that for a minute. How would that feel? Mm-hmm. And that was life-changing. I've had people come back 10 years later and go, Jeannie, I talk to my parents in another country every week because of that conversation you had. You just asked me that one question, how would you feel? Absolutely. Don't not talk to someone, right? But also make sure that in those relationships, they may still be alive, but they, like you said, they hold the power. But don't let them control your emotions. So it's you need to show up today. You need to have the right mindset on how you want to be, because your life is short too, and it's valuable. And this moment and living in the present and actually taking time to smell the roses and being present and not waiting for somebody else to give you that power back. Don't waste your life. Don't. Like, it's just kind of figure out who you are at the core and how you're going to be, and have that awareness. I think it really is beneficial to people. And I know it's, like you said, it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, I have ex-friends, I have an ex-husband, I have ex-bosses, I have all these relationships that, where are you today? What are you doing today? And what's your tomorrow look like? And how do you want to be? How do you want to show up?
What I really appreciate about what you just said with the relationship with your father and having the regrets and having I wish I would have said this. I think it's great that you acknowledged and that you took action afterwards. So it would have been easy for you to live in that regretful world for years, even still, and to this day be lamenting over, well, gosh, I didn't get to say this, I didn't get to say that. But it seems like what you did instead was recognize that and took action in other relationships that are still here, that you can make better so that you don't repeat that situation. And I love that you took this really tough situation, and instead of making it more difficult or being the victim in that situation and just letting that haunt you, that you said, wow, I wish I would have done this. So that's what I'm going to do in this other relationship. That's fantastic and really insightful of you.
Thank you. And as you know, my mom passed away, and I probably mentioned it just recently in March. But I look back, and there wasn't a day I regret, because I was so generous with my appreciation for her, and she knows the impact she had on my life because I communicated that. And it's really difficult. That's hard too. It's hard to sometimes get into the emotions and share, like, oh my God, Mom, I love you so much. And I'm so appreciative for you teaching me this, this, and that. Like, get specific. It's amazing. And then how you can make the other person feel, but how you feel too. Right. And I am the youngest of 6 kids. And so I was honored. It's a choice of words. I was actually given the honor to take care of my mom. And my siblings, for the last 10 years, mom had dementia, Alzheimer's. And I would say to my siblings, now would be a good time to come visit her. Like, she still knows who everybody is. Now would be a good time. Oh, things are getting, now would be a good time. They didn't come. They didn't call. And guess now? They are sad. They're living with some regret. They're calling me all the time and saying, I miss Mom. After the fact, it's a little too late. And I hate to be so blunt and hardcore, but when you have an opportunity to share the love that you have, the appreciation, I highly recommend it, because that helps this whole internal you to show up fulfilled on a regular basis, because you've done everything you can. And even with my siblings, I've been telling them for 10 years, you might want to do this. And as much as I want to say I told you so, I will never, right? Because that's not cool. But it breaks my heart, because they didn't have to be that way. And so I've thought about doing work with caregivers, or siblings, to say, really, like, how do you want to be at the end of this? And I feel like I actually absorbed my mom's soul in my soles, like in my shoes, like I'm walking around with Mom, because the relationship we had when she was here. And I think that's so important. It's so important. It's so important as we age, because you never know, we're losing friends. Right. Like, reach out to loved ones. And now that we can start to move about, I'm calling it move about the cabin after COVID.
Right.
I know more people are giving hugs. More people are realizing this. And if we can take the benefits of last year, that's one of them. They're realizing how important the important people are in our life, and how you want to be when you see them. And we don't take anyone for granted, or a lot of us don't, because it's short. Life's short. You never know what's going to happen. We did not expect that. I mean, I remember sitting there in January going, wow, what's happening in China or other parts of the world? And then going February, March, wait, what? We're closing down the schools? Crazy. Right. So you never know. And the things like earthquakes or fires, these things happen too. You just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And so I guess my advice to everyone is be fully present. I always used to say this: hug the ones you love and love the ones you hug. Just think about that. Hug the ones you love and love the ones you hug. And if you're in a relationship with work, personal, whatever it is, and it's not, I'm reluctant to use the word serving you, because it seems so selfish to me. But if
but I understand.
It's not a mutual, truly, like I call them my soul sisters, type of
Mm-hmm.
relationship, and they don't all have to be deep like that, but in a work world, you want to feel like you're connected, you have a sense of belonging, you
Right.
feel like you're a sense of inclusion and that you're being heard. If it's not, just be well aware that you have choices. And even if you've been in a relationship almost 50 years with a friend, the choice is yours to how you're going to move forward with it. And in some cases, like the one that I shared, the choice wasn't mine, but it's mine now. Like
Right.
I've realized what happened last year. And so we, for women, we've all been in relationships that really are not healthy. And just know,
Mm-hmm.
ladies out there and men, it goes both ways, that it's okay to move on at any age. It's okay, because I used to always say I would rather be single and happy than to with a partner and miserable, and I think
Right.
that's key.
So while our viewers and listeners are probably trying to do the math, I think I think a lot of people like me are confused as to how you've had friends for 5 decades, because there's no way that you can be more than 5 decades old.
Oh, I
But
am.
while people are trying to figure all that out in their head, I want to talk to you a little bit about um, your boundaries. And I know you said earlier that if this friend comes back into your life, great. If she doesn't, great, not great, but okay. I have the memories. So, where are you at with kind of the boundaries that you've set at this point? If she were to call you or text you today and say, "Wow, it was a rough year. I was super busy. Let's be lifers again." How do you feel about that?
It's a really great question. So my heart goes out to people that I've known a long time, but I also realize that I tend to have a boundary issue anyway. So I give back to what you said earlier in the call about the oxygen mask. It
Mm-hmm.
is rare for me to, although I preach self care, it's one of those things that I put on the back burner. And I've committed to
Mm-hmm.
myself the last couple years to really focus on this. So it's an everyday building that muscle of self care and
Mm-hmm.
boundaries. And so, having lived through what I have with this particular individual, there will always be a place in my heart for her. So, she is more than welcome to come back. What does that look like is what I'm going to create. And knowing what I know now and looking back over the decades, there's a pattern that I just I didn't really allow myself to observe because I felt we've been friends for so long, we're going to be lifers.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a
Right.
pattern there. So now that I know that, my boundary is going to be I'm not going to let myself get hurt next time. And it's not that I'm not going to let her in. I forgive myself for letting I would say she did this to me, right? But letting my emotions get the best of me for months last year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also forgive her, and I don't know what what has happened with her. So if she comes back and says it's been a really rough year, I'm going to be there for her as a friend. And she may very well really need somebody. And that's what true friends are. Like, I am not going to close the door and hold this grudge. That doesn't serve me well. And so
Right.
I will be there for her, but I have realized how I'm also going to drive the relationship and it not just be a one way where I give. And she's done some amazing things for me. She helped me move my mom out of her place when I had to put my mom in a nursing home. She was there for me every weekend. So there's things like that that I'll never forget. And I am so grateful for. And so when she's ready, I'm ready to help her any way that I can, in support of my boundaries as well.
You mentioned that you had forgiven yourself and you had forgiven her. And I think that's another great point along with closure is forgiveness is something that we have to do for ourselves. Again, not looking for any action from the person we are forgiving, because obviously you didn't get
Mm-mm.
anything, when you forgave her. She may not even know that you have forgiven her. So was that process like for you? Because I'm guessing that losing that relationship was very traumatic, almost like a
Mm-hmm.
death in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. So how was it for you to kind of go through that process and then be willing to forgive for yourself, for what's best for you going forward?
So that was one of, you mentioned it was like it was a loss of relationship. So it was almost like another death. And so I
Mm-hmm.
had my sister passed away December of 19, and then this relationship with this person. And there was a couple others. One died of COVID, my mom, a friend's husband. So there was a handful of deaths. And so I
Wow.
actually, after the last one, which was early March, which was just well, now it's already May. I decided to go to therapy, and it had been 25 years since I went to therapy. That's when I was contemplating my divorce. And
Mm-hmm.
I would tell the therapist, I'm feeling neutral. I'm feeling neutral over this relationship. And then I would proceed to express my feelings. And she was awesome. She's like, yeah, so you're not neutral. You're not neutral. And so I work with individuals to get neutral on relationships. I feel very neutral in my relationship with my ex-husband. So what do I have to do to get there? And you can have friends, you can have therapists, you can have a coach, you can have all these people, but the answers are within. So I would talk and I'd ask, so would you think I'm closer to neutral, right? And so it really just took time. It took self-reflection. It took, what do you want? What do you need? Not what you need from somebody else. What do you need from
Mm-hmm.
yourself? What do you need to do? What do you need to accept? What do you need, And so I went back to all of my interactions with this person early in 2020, and then all my feelings in the months that I was grieving over it. And in a sense, yeah, I had to go through the grieving process of the loss of the relationship. But now, as we sit here today, I did invite her to my mom's service. I do not feel I've lost the relationship. I think we all grow and evolve and change. We're all moving and changing. It's a dynamic world we're in, and who knows what's going to come our way. I don't feel I've lost it. I think it's evolved into something, and it may evolve back. It's like one of those lava lamps that,
Right.
move around, and that's okay. It's okay. And knowing what I that saying, people will not forget how you made them feel based on what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she didn't say anything. In absence of saying anything made me feel this way, but I chose to feel that way. So I'm taking responsibility for it. And so I have boundaries. But life is short, and our relationship was based on love, for friends, long-term friends. And I think, I have a place for her. It's just may not look exactly the same as it did prior to that incident.
Would you say that you are hopeful or neutral that she will show up for your mom's service?
Great question. And I am neutral. So if she shows up, it says a lot about where she's at. And if she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't show up, it's okay. I'm not going to look into it. I felt it was the right thing and what my mom would advise me to do as well. And I felt like I slept on it, and I'm going to make a decision that I'm not going to regret. So, listeners, take the time. Give yourself an opportunity to think about things before you make a decision. Not everything has to be done instantaneous. And oftentimes when you sit with it, either like in a nice quiet spot outside, somewhere in your house, overnight, sit with it, the answers will come from within that are the right answers for you. And it was really important that I invite her because she knew my mom like a mom. And how could I not at least give her the opportunity to show? So I do feel like today I am neutral, whether she shows up or not. And I'm okay with it either way.
That is fantastic. And I feel like that really shows the work that you have put in to healing yourself. And I'm so glad that you brought up that you started seeing a therapist, because I think a couple things. First off, a lot of people still have a negative connotation towards therapy. I think it's amazing. I think probably everyone should be in therapy for one reason or another. But what I also love is here you are, kind of the relationship expert, the guru, if you will, in helping other people do the things that you needed to do, yet you were willing to step out and say, you know what? I know how to do all this stuff. I teach other people how to do it, but I need some help right now doing it for myself. And you were willing to step out and be vulnerable and get that help that you needed to process everything.
Yeah, the therapist said the same thing. Almost exactly what you just said. Like, this is what you do for a living, but it's really says a lot about how you want to grow and learn and to request therapy. And I think we all need someone to talk to. And that's where coaches like me come into play. That's where therapists are amazing for people I agree. I think I highly recommend, and I cannot believe I had 25-year hiatus from therapy because now I almost don't want to live without her. I love my time with her. And the beauty of a coach or a therapist is, in a sense, you're not, I hate to use this word too, but burdening your friends with everything. Like, they're your spouse.
Right.
They don't need to know everything. So why don't you find somebody who you can share that stuff with? And so I highly recommend. Cheers to therapy. It's been an amazing month because of my relationship with my therapist.
I think that's wonderful. And I kind of always joke the day that I go to therapy, and kind of that morning, I'm walking around the office going, oh, what am I going to talk about to my therapist today? I haven't figured it out. What am I going to do? And it's like this stress of figuring out what I'm going to talk about. But it's always such an amazing experience of, like you said, kind of letting that burden onto somebody else that isn't a burden. I mean, that's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. So I think it's great when you can have that outside perspective that can offer insight to you from a place that your friends, your spouse, your significant other couldn't necessarily do that. So thank you so much for bringing that up and just sharing your experience with therapy and how great it's been. I wish we could give out, therapy vouchers to everybody, because I think it would be enormously beneficial.
So give it a try.
Right. Here's your one-time pass. So we have talked about so many things today, and you have thrown out so many gems of advice. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I'm going to say, if you could give one piece of advice to people that will help improve all of their relationships, what would that piece of advice be?
One piece of advice for all relationships. I think the most important part is understanding your values. So if it's not clear to you what your core values are, that would be the first step. Figure out what they are. Because when you know at any time what is most important to you, for example, I value respect. And so I respect everyone. I respect their time. I respect their authority. I respect their status. Janitors are as important to me as CEOs, and I You can ask any of them that have worked in organizations that I've been a part of. They're like, she makes me feel so important. Well, heck yeah, you're a human, right? So, but for me too, when my value of respect is compromised, I'm well aware of what happens to my stress level. And so I highly recommend people figure that out. And because when you know, you can feel it, you've identified what they are, and within seconds, you can determine how you're going to respond versus react. So that would be my number one advice is figuring out your core values and knowing what those are. Like I just said, you can respond versus react. Mm-hmm. But in a work world, or a personal romantic relationship, or even a friend relationship, you will be able to know when your values are being compromised, when you're feeling shortchanged, and you will have the ability to stand up for those. Now, that's not always easy because you're putting a line in the sand and saying, I'm not going to tolerate that. And that's important in the work world. I've done that many times over. I've been asked to do some unethical things at work. I've been asked to do things just because I was a female. And no, it wasn't sexual, but it was like, can you get me coffee? What? Mm-hmm. What? Why? Because what? I look like a stewardess? Like from what? This is ridiculous, right? Like, mm-hmm. And I don't even mean that like stewardess because they're obviously flight attendants and they're, but you know what I'm saying. But I knew what one of my core values were, and I would stick up for it no matter what. And that is when, the old saying, I think it was Kenny Rogers, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, right. Know when to run. Absolutely. So, number one advice, determine or identify your core values. And I can help people do that. I have a values assessment. I have an energy leadership assessment that can help you understand all this energy talk that I live and breathe and has been life-changing for me. Because that example of knowing your values, knowing when you have seconds to make a decision. Is right. It being compromised? How am I going to respond? Because when you react, you can't take that back. Mm-hmm. So it's a really great skill that I learned, and it has changed my life.
That's amazing. And I think it really would help somebody kind of create their own personal roadmap of life. Like you said, if you just determine those core values, you know what's meaningful to you. And that's going to be so beneficial with everything you do because you have that guiding star right there with you at all times.
Yes. And it is so powerful from within and then you actually know what's happening rather than like, oh, my intuition tells me this. You're like, no, I know exactly what it is. Yes, my intuition's driving it, but I know this core value or this core value is being compromised and I'm not going to do it. Like people are like, how did you know that? You're like, nope. Talk about boundaries. Like I am not going to cross that line with work. I will quit over that. Those are the type of things I'm talking about. And that's really like, it's powerful and it puts you in charge and you can create the life you want. My mom, when I was little, my mom would say, you can be anything you want to be. And you were saying, how can I be around 5 decades? 5 decades ago, my mom used to say, if you want to be the first female president, you can. And then as I grew up and saw politics, I'm like, no, thanks. I'm not interested in that. But that's important for people. And again, at any age, you know what? If you're ready to make a change, partner with somebody who can help you figure those tools out, put them in your toolbox so that you can show up differently because you only have one life and make it yours and shine. And I coach so many people on do what you're passionate about. And if you do what you love, the money will come. And I know it's easy, it's this vicious circle or the cart before the horse. But if you're in a role and you don't like it, have this other plan and know that that's a temporary. We can do anything temporarily, right? Knowing that there's an end, but then there's going to be this at the end. So I highly recommend, and that's with relationships of any kind. Just make it work for you. It's your life, and don't live for
I love
others.
that. Absolutely. Well, speaking of respect, I have taken up so much of your time today and I appreciate it. Before I let you go, will you tell the listeners and viewers how they can reach out to you? Where can they find you for your business, your social media? Let them know where they can find
Sure.
Jeannie.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I have a website. It's hr-rx.com. There is, several pages of information on there, and you can actually schedule a complimentary 15-minute session with me on the Contact Us page. Also on Instagram, it's Jeannie Smith 777, and there's a link there for all other. It's a link for the Sociotap, and it has all the other social medias there. And I actually like to provide a phone number now because I know a lot of people are not picking up the phone. And sometimes people are just like, I'm going to say it. Let's go old school. I do have an office line. It's 858-578-9831. Again, 858-578-9831. I will take your call. If you want to talk to somebody, I'm available for you. We all get a lot of emails, a lot of text, all of this. Call me if you want. Call me.
So the biggest surprise for me today was that you gave out a phone number. I have to admit, mind-blowing. But Jeannie, thank you so much for your time today. I loved chatting with you. I think that you shared some really amazing advice through your own life experiences, and I'm so grateful that you were willing to share that with me, with everybody watching and listening. So I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Oh, Claudia, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and I hope the listeners were able to gain some value from the conversation. And if you just think about one thing differently because of it, then I've done what I'm here to do. And so anytime, I'm here, and thank you so very much. That was wonderful. I had a good time.
Thank you. Wow, I really hope you enjoyed all the stories and advice that Jeannie shared with us today. I know that I learned so much from her, and I hope you did as well. So until next week, remember, you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're available on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at strongenoughpod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or guest, please email me at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.